So Manchester United were only recently, in the last few days, heavily linked with Lens's 29-year-old right-back Jonathan Klaus, in a rumoured switch worth around 8 to 10 million euros. However, it does now appear that Marseille will be his destination, with there not really being a reliable source stating that United really pushed hard for him, likely meaning that Klaus wasn't United's first choice target at right-back, but that Ten Hag and United wouldn't be opposed to the idea of bringing in another fullback, with deals for Antony and De Jong still on the back burner. But before I go any further, if you need a place where you can keep up to date with the latest transfer news, find all the match stats you need from games across the globe, and watch highlights and stream live football matches, then you need to download the OneFootball app. I use the OneFootball app because it's completely free, and not only do they have stats and transfer news, but they also have videos to watch and articles to read, which is where I get a lot of my ideas for new videos. And as I said before, you can stream live football matches and watch highlights all on the app. Downloading the OneFootball app will help support the channel as well, so I'll leave it linked in the description below. I think Klaus would have been a fantastic signing for United, as whilst he is 29, we do see a lot of defenders that are late developers and come into their peak around 28 to 31, so I don't really see that being much of an issue, as I wouldn't consider him a short-term signing, but more of a mid-term signing, with Diego Dalot or Ethan Laird maybe capable of being that long-term successor if they both progressed well. The transfer fee for Klaus would be cheap enough, and he would command a low enough salary where I don't really think signing a player approaching his 30s is really that risky. You mostly want to stay away from players who command big fees, or arguably more importantly a big salary, as players can decline at the top level over the course of a season or two, and so the bigger the salary, the bigger the risk. But Klaus isn't just a decent fullback, I think he's a contender for one of the most underrated fullbacks in Europe, having a pretty outstanding FBref report, ranking in the 93rd percentile for non-penalty goals, the 86th for non-penalty XG, the 97th for both assist and expected assists, and the 84th and 79th for progressive passes and progressive carries respectively. And this is all over the past 365 days, where Klaus has played 3,046 minutes. What we can see from his FBref report is that he's producing elite level attacking output in the final third, both creating chances from the right as well as getting into goal scoring positions as well. But he is also very useful in the defensive and middle third, having pretty strong numbers for ball progression, and he ranks extremely high for interceptions in the 97th percentile, which shows that he's a front foot defender who would suit Ten Hag's pressing style. However, with Klaus now looking likely to join Marseille, what other options are there for United? Well, Cole Walker-Peters has been the right back most heavily linked with Manchester United, but I think that's just a far too obvious target for United to go for, and I think I can find a number of better options even at lower prices. And to find out the best options, what I did is I looked at right backs in Europe's top 5 leagues who had FBref reports that stood out visually to me. Then what I did is I broke down the metrics which I would use to inform my decision on who is the best option into 3 main categories: defensive, ball progression and offensive. Defensive metrics would include tackle success rate, which I would get from who scored, looking at what percentage of a player's tackles he completed over the last season, interceptions and pressures, which would both come from the FBref report, which would show how good a front foot defender the fullback is. For the ball progression category, I would look at progressive passes, progressive carries and dribbles, and then for offensive I would look at expected assists, as I think that's the most important and covers most bases. I then combined offensive and ball progression metrics into one category, just calling it offensive to make it easier. So now we have 2 categories, offensive and defensive. Now I won't bore you with exactly what I did, but basically I just listed out where these players ranked for each metric in terms of the percentile, but I wanted an overall score to make it visually easier to see how good a right back actually is when it comes to offensive output and defensive output. So for the offensive output, I took an average of 3 different metrics: expected assists, which is ultimately the most important from an attacking point of view, and then the 2 highest out of progressive passes, progressive carries and dribbles. So if a player ranks really highly for say progressive carries and dribbles, below 4 progressive passes, we take out the progressive passes and then we just take an average from expected assists, the progressive carries and the dribbles. So these are the right backs I looked at, 11 in total. I included Adrien Truffet by accident because I didn't realise he was a left back. I couldn't do this for right backs like Pedro Porro, as FBref reports are only generated from Europe's top 5 leagues. So if you are wondering why it's only players from the top 5 leagues, that is why. But anyway, what I do is I add up the 3 metrics and divide it by 3 to get an average between 0 and 100, and then I round up to the nearest 10, so an 88 average will see a player end up with 90, and so will a 92. Also I did this with the 3 defensive metrics as well, and after that the players with the highest offensive metrics were Malo Gusto with 90, Jonathan Klaus with 90, Jeremy Frimpong with 90, Serginho Dest with 90, and Lirola at Marseille with 90. And then players who had 80s were Ridal Baku of Wolfsburg, Benjamin Hendricks of RB Leipzig, and Kyle Walker-Peters, who's at Southampton. Now obviously Manchester United want the best offensive right back that they can get, so players who recorded a rating under 80 I discarded from the shortlist, and that included fullbacks like Denzel Dumfries, who had a 60, Livramento at Southampton, who had a 70, and Wilfried Stephen Singo, who also had 70. For the defensive metrics I did the same, but I didn't exclude any as there were only 3 I took into account, which was tackle success rate, which I got from who scored, interceptions and pressures. Anyone under 60 got discarded, so bye bye for Lirola, who got a rating of 40, and Serginho Dest, who recorded 50. Frimpong and Kyle Walker-Peters had a rating of 60, which is decent but not outstanding, whilst Klaus, Henriks and Baku all registered a rating of 70, but one player registered 80, and that was Malo. Now if you didn't follow along with that, I probably just explained it really bad, but at the end of that statistical analysis we have an offensive and defensive score for each player, and from here we can narrow it down to 5 options: Gusto, Klaus, Frimpong, Henriks and Baku. Klaus is obviously going to have to be taken off the list as he's just moved to Marseille, so we'll take him off and we'll add Kyle Walker-Peters as a kind of backup just in case the others don't impress. But before we analyse the players, we actually need to define what Ten Hag would want from a right back. So in the preseason games it seems to be that Ten Hag is using some variant of a 2-3-2-3 shape in the build-up, and in the middle third as well, with one of the double pivot, usually Fred, dropping into that reduced position in line with the 2 fullbacks, as McTominay retains a higher position. From here the fullbacks are expected to vary their positioning, pulling out wide when the ball is on their side, but often inverting into a narrower position in the centre of the field when the ball is on the other side. This means that not only does an incoming right back need to be good at dealing with long passes from the centre back or goalkeeper into his chest to beat the opposition's press, as we have seen United do via De Gea and the 2 centre backs in pre-season, but Ten Hag would also require his right back to have the technical ability to essentially play as a deeper lying midfielder in some phases of possession, so would need to have immaculate ball control, be press resistant, and overall just have good interplay in congested areas. But in the final third, Ten Hag will also expect his fullback to hold a wider position to allow the wide attacker on that side to move in field when necessary, whilst also providing the over and underlapping runs to provide a forward passing option for the attacker on the right side, whether that's Sancho, Rashford or even Fernandes when he drifts out wide. So in short, Ten Hag needs a right back who has the technical capabilities of playing infield, but also the output in the final third when they get into that position. Obviously a right back that has all of these, plus being a good defender positionally and in one-on-one situations, is going to be extremely hard to find, but this is Manchester United we are talking about, and I do think that some of the players I've mentioned do fit that role perfectly. Benjamin Hendricks would be a very solid option for United. The German is 25 years old and has a contract at Leipzig until 2025. He's versatile, capable of playing as a left back or as a defensive midfielder if needed, so definitely suits the versatility and fluidity that Ten Hag uses in his system. He is much more of a passer than a dribbler, as seen as he ranks in the 93rd percentile for progressive passes, whereas for progressive carries he's ranking around the 69th, which is still pretty good, but dribbles are lower in the mid-30s, suggesting that Hendricks would be better as an inverted fullback, essentially being a central midfielder who is an excellent one-on-one defender, with him having a tackle success rate of around 77%, which is very impressive. Going forward, whilst I don't think he's as good as someone like Jeremy Frimpong in terms of his ability to beat a man, he does still have the end product in the form of a low cross into the box. He'd probably cost between 25 and 30 million pounds, and he is still young enough to develop into a top level fullback, having all the attributes needed. I just think that Malo and Jeremy Frimpong are superior options in the short and long term, which is why I'd rule out Hendricks if those two were available. An outside shout would be someone like Wolfsburg's Ridley Baku, who like Frimpong is an excellent carrier of the ball, being a lot broader than the Dutchman but still having the pace and dribbling ability to motor past opposition players powerfully down the right side. His FBref report shows he ranks pretty highly for every important offensive metric, ranking around the 70s for the progressive metrics, while sitting around the mid 80s to low 90s for his output in the final third. I do think that Baku would probably thrive more as a wing back with some extra defensive protection, as he certainly isn't as good as Gusto from a defensive point of view. I reckon he'd cost around 20 to 25 million pounds, as he has 3 years left on his contract, and Wolfsburg did sign him for around 8 million pounds in 2020. However, I think if Frimpong is available, United should target him instead, as I think he's a similar kind of fullback to Baku, being an overlapping fullback who has winger-like ability to drive the ball up the pitch. And even Malo isn't as good at ball carrying as a 21-year-old Leverkusen man, as seen as he ranks in the 97th and 98th percentile for dribbles and progressive carries respectively, whilst also ranking in the 89th percentile for expected assists. However, he isn't at Gusto's level defensively, not being as good positionally or in one-on-one situations, recording a tackle success rate of 60% compared to Gusto's 74.5%. If Malo wasn't as good going forward as he is, Frimpong would definitely be the better option, but I think Malo Gusto's all-round top-level ability and his versatility being able to play out wide or infield just gives him the edge over Frimpong, even though I do think that both would be excellent signings and definitely better overall players and value for money than Kyle Walker-Peters, who I do rate but not as highly as Baku, Henriks, Frimpong or Gusto. So Malo Gusto, according to my method of using statistics, which is a pretty decent way of doing it I would say, is the best right back both offensively and defensively from the players I selected, and when you watch him play you can see why. He's a very good physical fullback, having the upper body strength to go toe to toe with powerful attackers, whilst also having the pace and acceleration to make recovery tackles without the ball, or burst past a player when he has a ball at his feet. Positionally he's very good for his age, always having the awareness of where the attacker behind him is, and he's able to position himself in a way to cut off the pass or cross before it even gets to the attacker. This is something that you can't even say for top level fullbacks like Cancelo and Trent, who are prone to positional mistakes, particularly with players making blindside runs in behind them. Malo Gusto's reading of the game makes him the exact type of fullback you want at the back post, anticipating and tracking the run and intercepting the ball when needed. He records a tackle success rate of 74.5%, showing his one-on-one defending ability, and he also ranks in the 94th percentile for pressures and the 80th for interceptions, which is exactly what you would want from a right back in a Ten Hag team. See, having a front foot fullback in your side allows the press to be a lot more effective. Having a player who can step out and anticipate a pass quickly to intercept, or who can squeeze up the pitch at the right time to keep the press vertically compact is very important, and this is what Gusto would bring from a defensive point of view. In possession, not only can Gusto provide the ball progression through his carrying of the ball, as seen as he ranks in the 78th percentile for dribbles and the 91st for progressive carries, but he can also provide top level output in the final third, and I think this is what really makes Gusto stand out. A lot of fullbacks, even very good fullbacks, don't cover the three main areas of being a fullback to a top level standard. For example, whilst Jeremy Frimpong is top level when it comes to ball progression and chance creation, he's not at the same level that Gusto is defensively. Benjamin Henriks is a fullback who's very good in all areas, but doesn't have the same ball carrying ability as Gusto or Frimpong, and is a much better passer of the ball, which is why I think he suits playing more as an inverted fullback rather than as an overlapping one. I would also say this about Diego Dalot, who I think is a much better long and incisive passer than he is a dribbler or a chance creator in the final third. And given that we have seen in recent pre-season games Ten Hag's willingness to have the right back overlap Sancho, someone like Malo Gusto who can create chances via low or lofted crosses on the overlap would significantly improve United's right hand side in the attack. Gusto would definitely be an improvement on Diego Dalot and would give United two excellent options at right back, who both fit the mould of a Ten Hag fullback perfectly, just in different ways. Gusto would likely cost between £25 and £30 million, but I think in the grand scheme of things that he would be an absolute bargain, so it's definitely a deal that United should be looking to do, especially over someone like Kyle Walker-Peters. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and check out some of my other videos in the description below.